It was supposed to be an ordinary Saturday. One quick run to the hardware store and back. But by the time the sun went down, my life had been turned into a courtroom drama and a war with an HOA I had never agreed to join. I left thinking 40 minutes, tops. A couple of bags of mulch, some extra screws for the garden trellis I'd been fixing all week. The Texas heat was already cooking the driveway when I pulled out, and I remember a small nagging thought about the side gate. I should have closed it, I told myself, but I was expecting a gravel delivery later and didn't want to miss the driver. That tiny choice turned out to be catastrophic. When I pulled back into the driveway, something in my chest clenched. My front door. The one I always deadbolt, even for a 5-minute walk with the dog, was ajar. Not wide, just enough to make the world tilt. I killed the engine and sat there for a beat, the house before me utterly still, as if waiting for me to notice what it would do next. Then a slow shadow moved past the front window, deliberate and impossible to ignore. My first thought was thief. My second was my dog, and I swore I'd bury anyone who even touched him behind the shed. I called 911 before I even told myself I was being dramatic. Calm voice, name, address. There's someone in my house. The dispatcher told me to stay outside and wait for officers. I did exactly that, keys in one hand, phone in the other, heart pounding a furious rhythm. The cruiser arrived in under 10 minutes. Officer Warren, tall, buzzcut, the kind of guy whose step says he's handled worse than my Saturday, told me to hang back as he approached the home. He eased inside with his hand near his holster, calling out, "Police!" Step into the living room, hands where I can see them. Then came muffled voices and an argument, and for a second everything felt surreal, like a bad TV show. Warren reappeared and waved me in. "You're going to want to see this, Mr. Miller," he said. Walking into my living room felt like stepping into someone else's bad joke. Two people stood there in dull beige clothes and bright green volunteer vests, the kind of neon that screams neighborhood authority. One clutched a clipboard, the other a tablet, and both wore expressions of officious certainty. "Who the hell are you?" I snapped. "Green Pine HOA." The woman answered without skipping a beat. "We're conducting a compliance inspection after a resident complaint." My mouth went dry. "This is my house, my property. I'm not part of any HOA. The man, irritatingly calm, leaned forward. "Under Article 7, subsection C of the Green Pine HOA Code, we're authorized to enter community properties to verify hazardous or aesthetic violations." "That's community property," I said. "This isn't. I bought this because it wasn't under an HOA. I like my property the way I want it. Get out." They exchanged that look people give when you claim to be from another planet. "All properties on this street fall within the HOA's jurisdiction, sir," the woman said. "Why have the map on file?" "I have my deed." Officer Warren raised an eyebrow and turned to me. "Do they have any right to be here?" "No, absolutely not," I said. "Then they're trespassing," he told them. "Time to go." They grumbled, collected their papers, and left. But not before the woman offered a smug parting shot. "You'll be hearing from the board." Her smirk landed like a slap. "And they'll be hearing from my lawyer." I muttered back as I watched them walk off my property like they'd never done a wrong thing. I locked the door, bolted the gate, and went straight to my office to pull out every piece of paperwork I owned about the house. If they wanted a fight, I was ready to dig my heels in. The next morning looked deceptively calm. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I saw the bright orange envelope taped to the front door. The kind of envelope that makes your stomach drop with all the menace of jury duty or an audit. In huge letters across the top it read, Notice of show of violation. Immediate compliance required. My hands were shaking when I opened it on the porch. Inside was a printed list of alleged infractions, Section 3, Subsection 1. Overgrown front lawn exceeding 4 inches in blade height. Section 4, Subsection 7. Unapproved exterior structure, specifically a non-compliant greenhouse visible from the street. Section 5, Subsection 2. Improper storage of waste receptacles. Bins must be kept out of sight from the curb. Each violation came with its own delightful fine. $100 per day, per item. The letter ended with an icy ultimatum. Fix all violations within 10 days or face mounting penalties and potential legal action. I wanted to laugh, the absurdity of it all. But the anger hit first. I walked back inside, slammed the envelope down on the kitchen table, and just stared at it. Like maybe if I glared hard enough, the words would catch fire and disappear. They weren't apologizing for breaking into my home. They were doubling down, acting as if I was the criminal in their neighborhood fantasy. So I did what any homeowner with a pulse and a temper would do. I went digging. I yanked open my file cabinet, pulled out the thick folder marked House Purchase 2019, and dumped its contents across the desk. Title deeds, survey maps, tax forms, closing emails with my realtor. All of it. I even found the old plat map I'd requested when I bought the property. And guess what? Every single document said the same thing: my property. Lot 18, Miller Hollow, was not, and never had been, part of Green Pine HOA. Period. Full stop. But apparently, facts didn't matter to Green Pine. 2 hours later, a soft knock rattled my door. It was Jerry, my 70-something neighbor from across the street. Jerry was the kind of guy who knew the whole neighborhood's history. Which mailbox was original? Which oak trees had been struck by lightning? That kind of guy. He was always kind, polite, and never gossipy. But that afternoon, he looked uneasy, like a kid confessing a crime. I heard what happened, he said, quietly. They're coming for you now. Who's they, Jerry? He leaned in, eyes darting around like someone might be listening. The HOA, or more specifically, Karen. I'd heard the name before. Karen Landis, president of Green Pine HOA. Short blonde hair, 2 tight cardigans, and the kind of smile that could strip paint off a fence. I'd never met her personally, but every neighbor had a story. They've done this before. Jerry continued. Start with homes on the edge of the neighborhood, the quiet folks who won't fight back. They claim there was a vote, some retroactive annexation. Say if the majority agrees, it becomes binding. That's not how property law works. I muttered. Nope, he said. But they make it sound official. Send letters, tack on fines, and people give up. Easier than going to court. I nodded, my pulse rising. This wasn't confusion. This was a calculated campaign. Over the next few days, more envelopes started arriving. Some taped to the door, others hand, delivered by smug volunteers in neon vests. One even had an embossed gold seal. Real professional intimidation. That one claimed my property had been annexed under a community resolution, passed 2 years ago. Apparently, I'd missed the period to contest it, so my silence counted as agreement. According to their paper trail, I was now one of them, a member of their paper cage. Karen and her HOA army were using bureaucracy like a weapon. They weren't just pushing. They were choking me with technicalities. Enough legal garbage to scare off anyone who didn't know better. But I wasn't anyone. That night, I sent an email to an attorney I'd heard about through a coworker, Camila Rose. a property lawyer with a reputation for eating HOAs alive. She replied within the hour, short and sharp. Come by tomorrow. Bring everything. Before bed, I walked the perimeter of my yard with a flashlight, checking the locks, the side gate, the fence line. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. This wasn't about grass height or trash bins. This was about control, about someone deciding they had the right to own a piece of my life. Camila's office wasn't what I expected. No corporate glass towers, no mahogany desks. It was a cozy room above a used bookstore, reached by a creaky wooden staircase and a brass doorbell that jingled when I opened it. Camila herself was nothing like the lawyers I'd seen on TV. No gray suit, no blank expression. She had dark glasses, a silver nose ring, and a coffee mug that said, "Sue me," in bold white print. She didn't waste time. "So they entered your home without consent?" she asked, eyes scanning my folder. "Without consent or a warrant," I said. "And your deed explicitly excludes you from any HOA jurisdiction." "Positive," I said, handing over copies. Camila flipped through the pages like a detective reviewing evidence. "Yeah," she said under her breath. "I've dealt with these people before. Green Pine HOA, notorious for this kind of stunt. 2 other clients had run-ins with them. Both settled, but not before the HOA lost big. They rely on intimidation," she continued. "Paperwork, pseudo, legal phrasing, long threats designed to exhaust you. They bet on you giving up before they have to prove anything." "Well," I said, "they picked the wrong guy. I've got time, fury, and a steady paycheck." Camila smirked. "Good. Then let's give them something to lose sleep over." That same afternoon, she drafted and filed a cease and desist letter addressed directly to the Green Pine HOA board, and personally CC'd Karen Landis. It cited violations of state property law, criminal trespass, and harassment. Camila even added a clause threatening civil damages if they so much as stepped on my grass again. But Green Pine didn't back off. Not even close. 3 days later, a landscaping crew rolled up to my house. No warning, no paperwork. Just started hacking away at bushes that didn't need trimming. They tore up the rose bed I'd planted, marked my mailbox with orange chalk, and one guy started measuring my porch like he was preparing for construction. I stormed outside, barefoot, gym shorts, half a cup of coffee still in my hand. "Who sent you?" I demanded. The lead worker barely looked up. "Work order from Green Pine HOA. I told them to leave." They didn't. I told them again, louder this time, and added that if they didn't pack up in the next 30 seconds, I'd file trespassing charges and bill them for damages. That did it. They left, but not before snapping one of my solar lights out of the ground. I called Camila immediately. "Take photos. Get timestamps. Keep receipts," she said. "They're trying to bait you into losing your temper. Don't give them that satisfaction." That night, I installed cameras. 1 at the gate, 2 on the sides, and 1 pointed straight down the driveway. Motion, activated, infrared, high definition. If they wanted to play surveillance games, I'd beat them at it. A week later, things took an even stranger turn. I was working late one evening, the house quiet except for the hum of my computer, when I heard it. A knock. Not on the door. On the garage wall. I stepped outside, and there he was. A uniformed private security guard, standing in my driveway under the floodlight. He wore a patch stitched across his vest that read Green Pine HOA Compliance Patrol. Compliance Patrol. What was this? East Berlin. I stared at him, half expecting a camera crew to jump out yelling prank. "Sir," he said flatly, "we've received a report of possible chemical storage violations on your property." I blinked. I'm sorry, what? He nodded toward my greenhouse. The greenhouse. There may be hazardous materials. Fertilizer, flammable liquids, solvents. I actually laughed. You mean miracle, grow and weed killer. His face didn't twitch. I'll need to inspect the interior. Yeah, I said. You're going to need a warrant first. He didn't move. Just stood there like a department store version of RoboCop waiting for me to break. I didn't. You're trespassing? I said, holding up my phone. You're on camera, and I'm calling the police. That did it. He backed up slowly, muttering something into his radio before heading toward his truck. Camila wasted no time. By noon the next day, she had filed a motion for a temporary restraining order against any representative of Green Pine HOA or its affiliates from setting foot on my property. She attached every photo, recording, timestamp, and even the body camera footage from Officer Warren's earlier visit. The judge signed it within 72 hours. That should have been the finale. Instead, Green Pine just shifted gears. That weekend, a full-page editorial appeared in the community newsletter titled, "One Home Harms the Whole." It didn't mention my name, but it didn't need to. Everyone in the neighborhood knew exactly who they were talking about. The article dripped with passive-aggressive venom. About certain residents refusing to participate in community standards, about potential hazards, and neglected property values. My mailbox was stuffed with copies, some even highlighted in pink. They weren't just attacking my property anymore. They were going after my name. And deep down, I knew this wasn't about rules. This was personal. Someone with manicured hair, a fake smile, and a god complex, had decided to make me their mission. It was a brutal Tuesday afternoon, the kind of Texas heat that makes the air itself seem angry. I was in my home office, headphones on, halfway through debugging a stubborn code error when my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Backyard camera. I figured it was the gravel delivery finally arriving. 2 weeks late. I clicked the live feed. My blood froze. 2 men in dark Green Pine HOA polos were already inside my fenced yard. One was sifting through my firewood pile. The other was walking toward my shed, carrying bolt cutters. I didn't think. I ran. Barefoot, half-dressed, sprinting across the grass with adrenaline doing all the work. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. One of them jumped. The other didn't even flinch. He held up a laminated piece of paper like it was an FBI badge. "Routine HOA inspection. Sir, we've had complaints about fire hazards and possible chemical storage. We have a right to inspect under Section 8. You don't have a right to be anywhere near my yard." I snapped. "There's a restraining order signed by a judge." The one with the bolt cutters finally stopped. He didn't look guilty. Just annoyed. "Why, we're told the order doesn't apply to official safety inspections," he said. "By who?" He hesitated. "Mrs. Landis." Of course. I called the sheriff's department before they'd even made it back to their truck. I was done playing defense. While I waited, I took photos. The busted latch on the shed, the trampled flower bed, and the HOA clipboard one of them had left behind in their hurry. At the top of the first page was my name, circled twice in red ink. Beneath it, written in bold marker, "Highest priority target before summer vote." What the hell was that supposed to mean? Deputy Morales arrived 20 minutes later. Calm, stern, and clearly not in the mood for HOA theatrics. She reviewed the damage, took my statement, and scrolled through the footage on my phone. Her jaw tightened with each frame. "They said they had permission from the board," she asked. "Board of what?" I said. This isn't a country club. It's my backyard. She didn't argue. She just nodded, asked for copies of the video files, and told me she'd be forwarding the entire case to the county prosecutor. Camila called that evening to confirm it. Green Pine HOA was now facing criminal trespass and property damage charges. The restraining order violation alone carried potential jail time. For one sweet, fleeting moment, I thought maybe this nightmare was finally over. I was wrong. That Saturday morning, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, texts, even voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. One was from Jerry. "Aid, you might want to check your mailbox," he said, voice low and anxious. I stepped outside in my robe, still groggy, and froze. My porch was littered with flyers. Dozens of them, shoved under the door and into the mailbox slot like confetti. Across the top in huge bold print: Miller's madness. Dangerous neighbor or local threat. Beneath that, smaller text: one man's refusal is putting our community at risk. They'd plastered grainy black, and white photos of my house. One of me yelling at the landscapers, another showing the greenhouse, taken from an angle that had to be someone's second-story window. This wasn't enforcement. This was smear propaganda. I jumped online, opened the Green Pine Residents Facebook group. Public access, even for non-members. And there it was. A thread already hundreds of comments deep, everyone debating. That guy on Lot 18, who was ruining things for the whole community. Some comments were sympathetic. Most weren't. And then I saw her. Karen Landis, president of Green Pine HOA, had left her little manifesto right in the thread. Our HOA exists to preserve safety and unity. When one resident refuses cooperation, the rest of us pay the price. Community safety is not optional. It was signed with her full name and title, like some kind of royal decree. Camila was livid when I sent it to her. "They're crossing into defamation now," she said. "They're not just trying to scare you. They're shaping public opinion, manufacturing consent for whatever comes next." And she was right. Because that night, just when I thought I'd seen every trick in the HOA playbook, I heard it. A low, buzzing sound over my backyard. A drone. It hovered above the greenhouse like a mechanical hornet, its little red light blinking as it circled. I grabbed a broom and waved it off, yelling, but it didn't leave. It just drifted higher, like it was documenting everything. The next night, it came back. And the night after that, Camila filed a formal privacy complaint with both the FAA and the local sheriff, but she warned me it would take time. "Everything in this system takes time," she said. Meanwhile, Karen and her board weren't waiting. They were escalating, faster, louder, and more brazen. They weren't just bending the rules anymore. They were getting ready to rewrite them. The courthouse smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind of place where honesty seemed to get tangled in red tape. Camila and I sat across from each other at a long wooden table surrounded by boxes filled with documents, printed photos, video stills, and one thumb drive that could probably capsize a cruise ship. The preliminary hearing had just begun, and already Karen was performing a masterclass in smug composure. She sat across from us in a spotless cream blazer, flanked by two HOA lawyers who looked like they'd been hired straight out of a law firm called Threat and Delay LLP. She never once looked my way. Not a glance. Just whispered to her lawyers, all nods and polite smiles, as if this were a bake sale and not a court case about harassment, trespassing, and illegal surveillance. The judge, an older man with wary eyes and a reputation for despising HOA theatrics, sifted through the file for a full 10 minutes before speaking. "Let's get one thing clear," he said. his tone dry and gravelly. This isn't a landscaping dispute or a neighborly spat. This is a property rights case with criminal allegations attached. Treat it as such. Camila rose like she'd been waiting her whole career for that cue. Her opening statement landed with precision. Calm, sharp, deliberate. She walked the judge through everything. The backyard break, the footage of the SO, called Compliance Patrol, the flyers, the drone recordings, the restraining order, and finally, the HOA clipboard with my name circled and labeled, highest priority target. The judge's brow lifted slightly when that came up. Karen's legal team tried to keep their poker faces, but you could see the tension tighten their smiles. Their argument was predictable. The HOA had acted in good faith. They claimed there had been confusion over newly voted jurisdiction boundaries, that perhaps some enforcement went too far due to miscommunication. Miscommunication, as if breaking into someone's property with bolt cutters was just a scheduling error. Then came the real curveball. Karen's team filed a counterclaim right there in court. A petition to assert HOA authority over my land, claiming my property had been annexed in a 2021 special vote. They argued my refusal to participate didn't exempt me. To prove it, they handed over a smudged map, typed meeting notes, and a page bearing what they claimed was my signature. The only problem, it wasn't mine. Camila didn't even blink. She requested an immediate forensic handwriting review and pointed out that on the exact date they said, I'd attended that meeting. I had email logs and receipts showing I was in Colorado at a tech conference. Their little forgery collapsed right there on record. When the hearing adjourned, I thought that was the end of the surprises, until a woman stopped me in the hallway. She looked nervous, eyes darting around like she expected Karen to crawl out of a vent. "You don't know me," she said, voice low. "I live on Birchwood. Karen hit me with a violation last year. Said my curtains weren't the right color." I blinked. "You're kidding. She fined me $400. The woman went on. Then someone called code enforcement and claimed I was running an unlicensed daycare. I'm a teacher. I don't even have kids. I asked her why she was telling me all this. Because you're standing up to her. People are paying attention. There's a lot of us who've been waiting for someone to fight back. She wasn't exaggerating. Over the next week, more residents came forward. 8 in total. Some with small grievances, others with full-blown horror stories. One was fined for lawn aggression. Another for having a non-regulation mailbox. Someone else had gotten a citation for invisible fence violation. Camila gathered their statements, cross-referenced every document, and filed a motion to merge all our cases into a class action suit. 10 plaintiffs versus Green Pine HOA and Karen Landis personally. The list of charges: fraud, harassment, abuse of power, forgery, and violation of court orders. The story spread fast. Local news picked it up under the headline, HOA or hostile takeover. Residents fight back. They even used one of the drone shots, ironically taken by the HOA themselves, as B-roll footage, panning over my backyard like I was some suburban whistleblower. Karen, naturally, went on the defensive. She posted a self-righteous letter on the HOA website titled In Defense of Order, packed with condescending moral platitudes and half-baked biblical quotes. But while she was busy preaching online, Camila dug up something that finally tied the bow around the whole mess. Turns out, Karen had been running a side business. Her company, Civic Harmony Solutions, acted as a consulting intermediary between the HOA and the city's inspection department. Whenever she flagged a resident as non-compliant, the city would open a formal inspection. For each citation issued, Karen's firm collected an administrative fee from a discretionary beautification fund. In short, she'd turned the HOA into a profit machine. Every fine the city issued, she got paid. It wasn't a community project anymore. It was organized extortion. Camila built a meticulous evidence packet. Wire transfers, signed contracts, timestamps, and forwarded it to the district attorney's office with a neatly worded cover letter. We believe the enclosed materials may be of criminal interest. Meanwhile, I tried to stay off the radar. Cameras stayed on. Curtains stayed closed. Because the more pressure we applied, the more unhinged Karen became. And unhinged people, they make mistakes. Big ones. It started just after midnight. I was half asleep when a sharp crack jolted me upright. My first thought was that the dog had knocked something over. Then I smelled it, burning plastic and smoke. I ran to the window, and the whole front yard glowed orange. I bolted outside barefoot. A trash can was on fire near the mailbox, flames licking upward, melting the bin, black smoke curling into the night air. I grabbed the garden hose, dousing it until only wet ash and warped plastic remained. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Then I saw it. Red spray paint scrawled across my garage door. One word. Tyrant. By the time the police arrived, I had already reviewed the footage. Clear as day. 12:37 a.m. A figure in a hoodie creeping up the walkway, carrying a spray can and something bulky. She painted the word, carefully placed the trash can, poured something inside, lit it, and ran. It wasn't some random vandal. It was staged. Watching it again, frame by frame, my stomach turned. The gait, the shape, even the way her hair stuck out from the hood. It was Karen. She had actually done it. The queen of compliance herself had crossed the line, staging an attack on my home, probably hoping to frame it as retaliation or justify future safety actions. And the kicker, 2 hours later, she filed a police report against me, claimed she feared for her safety, said she'd been receiving anonymous threats she believed came from me. When the officers knocked on my door again that morning, they weren't there to arrest anyone, just to get a full picture. I showed them the footage. I showed them the scorched lawn, the spray paint, everything. One of them nodded slowly, eyes narrowing as he watched the video. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just a petty HOA feud anymore. It had spiraled into something darker, something personal. And the woman who started it all, she was willing to burn down the whole neighborhood just to win. Lucky for me, I had the frame-by-frame evidence of Karen on my property setting the trash can ablaze. I handed the clip to Camila with no preamble. By dawn, she was already on the phone with the district attorney's office, sending them the footage. Check timestamps, Karen's earlier violations, and a short, unambiguous memo titled, "This woman has lost her goddamn mind." To their credit, the DA didn't dilly-dally. By that afternoon, Karen Landis was slapped with a temporary restraining order, not only from me, but on behalf of all 10 plaintiffs in our consolidated complaint. Within 24 hours, the footage was all over the local news. The headline read something like, HOA President Caught Staging Attack in Escalating Neighborhood Feud. Public opinion started to swing. But Karen didn't collapse into contrition. Her attorney trotted out a press statement accusing the footage of digital tampering and painting Karen as the victim of an extremist smear campaign. Anti-HOA extremists, they called us. I might have laughed if fury hadn't been doing the laughing for me. The real consequence of the story, though, was that it opened a floodgate. Calls and messages poured in not just from Green Pine residents, but from people in other communities across the county. Stories of relentless fines, surveillance, and petty harassment. Camila's inbox filled with voicemails, emails, hand-delivered letters, and at least a couple of brave souls who walked into her office in person. She hired 2 interns just to intake and catalog the material. What had started as a neighborhood fight was clearly part of something bigger, and Char had not been acting alone. One of Camila's researchers dug through municipal budget documents and found a buried line item titled something like Beautification Enforcement Coordination Fund. It had been quietly approved 3 years earlier and granted discretionary control to a city code enforcement officer who, oddly enough, had once served on Green Pine's board. The arrangement smelled rotten. Karen had been feeding names and addresses of non-compliant residents to city inspectors. The city would then issue formal citations. For every citation processed, Karen's consulting firm, Civic Harmony Solutions, pocketed administrative fees from that very discretionary fund. In short, fines flowed into a pipeline that fattened her company. It wasn't civic duty, it was a racket. Camila compiled bank records, contracts, and email chains, then sent the dossier to the DA with a succinct cover letter. We believe these materials warrant criminal investigation. Within days, a local reporter who covered municipal corruption ran a front-page piece titled The HOA Cartel: How One Woman Turned Community Governance into Personal Profit. The story exploded. The city council scheduled an emergency session. The mayor issued a statement promising full cooperation. The DA officially opened an investigation. And Karen, predictably, vanished. Her lights went out. Her car disappeared from the driveway, phones went unanswered, and the HOA office began routing callers to an automated message about reorganization. But the apparatus she'd built remained intact. The systems of enforcement and the people who pulled the levers were still in place. They simply needed new oversight. Camila leaned over a growing stack of newly sworn affidavits one evening and said, "This is way bigger than we thought. You weren't a lone target. You were an example." She looked me straight in the eyes when she said it. Courtroom attendants surprised me that next hearing morning. The room, usually a sleep-inducing theater of motions and stipulations, was packed shoulder to shoulder. Reporters clustered outside the courthouse doors, like vultures awaiting a feeding, and cameramen lined the hallway. Camila and I had to fight through the scrum just to reach our table. Microphones thrust forward, bright flashes popping at odd, embarrassing moments. I kept my mouth shut. No off-the-cuff comments. Not yet. Karen did appear this time, escorted in like someone attending her own funeral. All black, sunglasses indoors, and a tired, brittle air. The judge from the preliminary hearing looked sharper, as if he'd had time to read everything and was no longer interested in tolerating games. He opened without preamble. We were there to consider certifying the class action, evaluate criminal allegations, and determine the leadership standing at Green Pine. Camila set a heavy binder on the table with a sound like a gavel. She methodically walked the court through our mountain of proof: repeated trespasses, fake inspection claims, forged minutes and signatures, surveillance drones, smear flyers, the staged arson, and the financial trail connecting fines to Civic Harmony Solutions. Every exhibit landed with weight. The clipboard with my name circled. Highest priority target. The bank transfers, emails between Karen and city inspectors, the drone footage. And then Camila did something boldy. She played the whole fire video in court. The courtroom speaker crackled as Karen's silhouette appeared on screen, stepping up, spraying paint, tipping the trash can, pouring an accelerant and lighting it. The room fell utterly silent. Karen's lead counsel tried to shout the footage down, calling it unduly prejudicial. The judge overruled the objection without hesitation. Then Camila called witnesses. 3 people from neighboring areas who recounted eerily similar harassment. An elderly man named Samuel, whose voice shook, told the court how refusal to replace his fence led to a cascade of fines that ultimately forced him to sell his home under financial duress. "I never joined their HOA," he said plainly. "They just showed up and told me I was bound." Others described phantom violations, anonymous complaints, and relentless pressure until some finally capitulated. Next, the city's internal affairs representative took the stand. Their report confirmed the money trail, the discretionary fund usage, and consulting payments made to a private entity owned by Karen Landis. The investigators' testimony wasn't a rumor. It was an official confirmation that something systemic and corrupt had been operating under a thin veneer of municipal authority. By the time the day ended, the courtroom no longer felt like a place where local squabbles were resolved. It felt like an exposure chamber where a small, comfortable injustice had been yanked into the light and examined from every angle. The question that hung heavier than any other was whether the legal system would dismantle the machine Karen had engineered, and whether the people who'd benefited from it would be held accountable. The prosecution had wrapped up their case, and when it was Karen's turn, her team tried to spin the story in every direction they could. They painted her as a misunderstood leader, claiming her actions were rooted in community stewardship. They said she'd been misinformed by aggressive subordinates, that she never meant harm, and that the fire at my property was the result of a mental breakdown triggered by fear and harassment. That line almost made me laugh out loud. When Karen finally took the stand, she turned on the theatrics like she'd been rehearsing for a soap opera. Tears, trembling voice, dramatic pauses. The whole act. She talked about the weight of responsibility, the cruelty of online backlash, and called herself a victim of hate and intimidation. According to her, I had riled up a mob, and everything she did was to protect order and harmony. In the neighborhood, the judge just watched her in silence, expression flat as drywall. Then, without a hint of sympathy, he said, "Mrs. Landis, you are hereby removed from any official capacity within the Green Pine Homeowners Association. Effective immediately." She blinked, just once, realizing in that instant her power was gone. But he wasn't finished. Furthermore, he continued, "This court will refer your actions for review by the district attorney's office, with a recommendation for charges including criminal trespass, property destruction, falsifying official documents, defamation, and filing a false report." Karen's jaw tensed, but she didn't say a word, just a stiff nod, face pale as marble. The rest came down like a domino line. The HOA was placed under temporary court control. A full forensic audit was ordered. All fines issued in the last 3 years were frozen pending review. Every one of us in the class action received provisional damages. Mine alone topped 75 grand. Camila leaned over and whispered, "We didn't just win. We burned their rule book." Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned again. Flashing lights, reporters, microphones in every direction. Camila gave a short, clean statement to the press, calm as ever. I hadn't planned to say anything, but the questions came like a storm. One reporter shouted, "Mr. Miller, how does it feel to bring down the HOA?" I paused, looked straight into the camera, and said, "This was never about taking anyone down. It was about getting my damn rights back." That clip spread everywhere within hours. By the end of the week, Green Pine's website quietly disappeared. Karen's house went up for sale. Cash only. No tours. Word spread fast that she was moving out of state. But deep down, I knew it wasn't finished. The further we looked, the more tangled the web became. Karen hadn't built that system alone, and Green Pine wasn't the only HOA that had turned rotten. What we'd uncovered wasn't the end of the story. It was just the opening chapter. 6 months later, life looks different. The grass is taller than it should be. The greenhouse still isn't painted, and for the first time in years, my door hasn't seen a single envelope or fine notice taped to it. Peace doesn't arrive with parades or headlines. It just sneaks in one morning and sits quietly on your porch, waiting for you to notice. But peace isn't the whole truth, not after a war like that. Things didn't simply calm down, they changed. The same neighbors who once avoided me now wave when they pass. Some even stop to chat. Jerry across the street mowed the edge of my yard one morning, without saying a word. Later, I found a thumbs-up note stuck to my mailbox. Camila called it community unlearning, the slow realization that people had been complicit in something ugly without meaning to be. A few Green Pine board members quietly resigned. One sent a formal apology letter. Another tried to reinvent the organization under a new name, the Neighborhood Enrichment Council. No one showed up to the first meeting. The settlement checks rolled out in stages. Mine arrived with an extra zero by mistake. Camila caught it before I could do something stupid, like buy a boat, just to wave at Karen on her way out of town. As for Karen, she took a plea deal. No trial, no cameras, no drama. Just a quiet agreement: pay restitution, resign from all HOA-related activities, and stay the hell away from us. Word is she packed up, moved to Arizona, changed her last name, and now runs a Facebook group called Community Pride for Patriots. Fitting, right? But the story didn't end there. The journalist and Camila kept digging, uncovering even more corruption in neighboring HOAs. Turns out, Green Pine's shady playbook wasn't unique. Across the county, people were being fined into foreclosure over things as small as mailbox paint, backyard pits, and garden sheds. That Beautification Coordination Fund we'd exposed. It existed in 4 other districts, each one funneling cash into private accounts. So Camila decided to do something bigger. With the settlement money, she launched a nonprofit, Home Guard Legal Defense, a free legal service for homeowners bullied by overreaching HOAs. Within weeks, her inbox was overflowing. Within months, she had 6 lawyers, 2 paralegals, and 1 guy named Cliff who could dig through zoning files like a caffeinated detective. She asked if I'd help out. Not full-time, just consulting. Help new clients understand the tricks, the warning signs, the ways to fight back. I told her I'd think about it. But I already knew the answer. Now I spend 2 afternoons a week at a small office next to hers. I tell people my story, show them the footage, the paperwork, the aftermath. I tell them, you're not crazy. You're not alone. You're not powerless. Every time someone leaves our office, standing a little taller, I know the war was worth it. We even put up a small sign at the end of my block, no HOA zone. Community, not control. Some neighbors rolled their eyes, muttered about anarchy. But you know what happened? Nothing bad. No chaos, no rule breaking, no fines. Just neighbors living freely. Kids running, dogs barking, cookouts that smell like real summer again. Last week, Jerry stopped by with a bottle of whiskey. He poured us each a glass and said something I'll never forget. "You didn't just win, Ed," he said. "You broke the spell." I laughed, but he wasn't wrong. Karen hadn't just ruled an HOA. She'd ruled through quiet fear, through polite obedience, through the belief that no one would ever challenge her. Until someone finally did. And if I had to do it all over again. Every fine, every sleepless night, every fight. I'd do it in a heartbeat. Because this is my home. And I'll be damned if anyone ever tries to take it from me again. And that is how one neighborhood learned that power only works if people stay silent. From hidden corruption to community rebirth, the fall of Green Pine wasn't just about one HOA. It was about standing up when no one else would. If you've ever dealt with an overreaching HOA, remember, rules don't define a community. People do. Thank you for watching HOA Story Files, where every neighborhood has a story, and every story deserves to be told. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life HOA battles, revenge, and justice stories every week. See you in the next one.